Hello, it's Michael here from EduKits. Today I'm really excited to be walking you through how to use our CodeKit app, which is an app for creating drag and drop code programs for Arduino. Let's get started. First of all, head to the EduKits website, which is edukits.co. In our top menu, under the option that says Code, you can select the Launch Web App button. If you want to learn more about CodeKit, view some of the features later, you can just click this main link over here with the image, but for now we're going to click to launch the web app. You'll notice it loads in just a second or two in your browser, and you can see we have a blank workspace. In the left, a few categories here. These are where you'll find different blocks. If you click on these, they will open a flyout panel and you can scroll through to see the different blocks in that particular category. So this is the input and output category, and we have options for reading and writing to different pins, and also a few different sensors and little goodies down there. There are a heap of other categories down here as well. Over here is the top toolbar. You'll be used to this kind of toolbar if you've worked with any regular software programs before. These have your main functions like opening documents you've been working on before, saving the current one, undoing, redoing, clearing the whole workspace, or checking out preferences, which I'll get to later. If you ever have any problems or if you want to request some features, you can click on the Help button, which will send you to our Help and Support page for EduKits. So let's jump right into creating some code. Firstly, we'll open one of these panels, let's say the input-output panel, and let's grab a simple digital write block. You can see over here that I've clicked on it, dragged it, and dropped it into this main white box, which is known as the workspace. Now, on the right-hand side, you can see that there's been code that's been written automatically, and this code will change as we change different parameters here. So it's currently set to set pin 0, but if I click on this, a little drop down will appear. I can scroll through and select from the pin numbers, so say pin 10. So we're setting pin 10 to high. Now, if we want to set a delay, so maybe alternate between pin 10 being high and low, we can go to the timing section, add in a delay block, put it underneath, and then duplicate this block by right-clicking the top one, move it underneath, set it to low, and then lastly duplicate and drag this block to the bottom. So you can see over on the right, the code has automatically added that pin to the setup as an output using the pin mode function. Then it's writing that pin to high, having a delay, and writing it to low again. Now, even though there isn't any kind of explicit setup or loop wrappers around these, the blocks and the extra helper functions that are needed have automatically gone where they need to in the code, so you don't really have to worry about any of that when you're getting started. However, if we do want to add something to the setup, for example, we can do that, and that comes under the loops section. You can see this top block here that says setup, then loop forever, and we can drag this over and wrap it around the current code. Now you want to wrap the bottom section, not the top section, because that will put it all in the setup, but the bottom section into the loop. So we've retained those parts in the loop, but now we can add additional things to the setup. So for example, you might want to check the state of an input and use that to control the initial state of an output. So what we can do is add another digital write block. This time we're going to be writing, let's say, pin 6. Now, one of the cool things about these drop downs is you can set the values directly from the drop downs, or you can put other blocks in over the top of them to substitute in a variable value. And I'll show you what I mean right now. So instead of you taking the value we're going to set pin 6 from this drop down, I'm going to actually read the state of another pin and mirror it. So I've dragged out this state of pin block, and you can see it's the same shape as that high drop down, and I'm going to put it over the top. And you can see it clicked in there perfectly. And if you look in the code here, the state of that pin is actually dependent on the state of pin 0. and you can change that pin as well. So now we have a basic setup and loop situation here. At this point, you might want to save your project, and you can rename it here if you'd like. But one of the cool things about CodeKit is that by default, your code is auto-saved in the browser. So if you close the tab and come back or refresh the page, the code will still be there. And I'll show you that right now. So you can see the page is reloaded and our entire workspace is there as we left it. That's cool. So we have this current code, and we might want to make it more complex. And as you can see, there are a lot more blocks over here we can use to do that. First of all, variables are an important part of many Arduino projects. So you might want to set one of your pins or both of your pins as a variable. And we'll use an integer variable for this. So we'll say LED pin, for example, and we will put that in the setup. Set LED pin to something, and we'll grab a maths block for this. And if you click and drag a number block over, you can change this to, say, 10. So that's every time it says pin 10, we can drag the LED pin over and in there instead. And like with the state of the pin, you can use other blocks rather than the drop down to specify the pin. Now for good measure, I'll create another variable, and I'm going to call this input pin. We'll set that up in the setup as well. This time I'm going to make it 7 to match the other one. And then we will put that input pin over here. Now, if you want to change those values at any time, you can just change the variable up the top, and they'll change everywhere throughout the program because they're called. Okay. Another thing you can do is rename the variables after the fact. So if, say, we've got the LED pin and we're not using an LED pin anymore, maybe we'll use a buzzer. So we'll call it buzzer pin, and all that code will update. That's cool. Now, we can also use functions to wrap reusable parts of our code and then call them elsewhere. So I'm going to grab a function out here, just a simple function, and you can see it says to do something. And this is our function name. So we can rename this make noise, and then stick our entire buzzer setup over here. Okay, so we need to then call that from the loop because this is separate. The loop's empty now. So I'll go into the functions flyout and click and drag this make noise block straight into there. So now we've abstracted this make noise function. We've called it in the loop, and now we have a bit more of a complex program. Now, this doesn't really do anything, so we'll add some conditional logic here. I'll click on the logic tab, we'll bring out this if statement. I'll put the make noise statement in here so that it only makes noise. It is only called if a certain condition is met. And I think for now, we'll drag in a comparison block and we'll read the state of an input. So we can drag an analog read. So we'll read analog pin 0. And again, you can either use a variable here, or you can use the drop down to specify the pin. And we'll set it less than, let's say, 12. So now we have this make noise function, and we're only going to call it if the reading from analog pin A0 is less than 12. Now we can make this a bit more complicated because this is turning a buzzer on and off, so it's going to beep once. But before we had it looping, so I think we'll stick this in another loop block. So we're going to repeat this code a certain number of times. So at the moment it's 10 times, but this is a function, so we can actually pass a value to it when we call it, telling it the number of times we want it to run. So if you select this make noise function, right click on it, you can, wrong step. You've got to click the cog icon first, add an input here, and you can see that it now says with X. And over here it says make noise with X. So this is a function parameter we have now. And I can actually rename it up here. So we'll call it repeats or beeps. We'll call it beeps. Okay, with beeps. I'll click the cog icon again to close that fly out. Now, if I select this yellow block again and right click, I can click create get beeps. Okay, so now I have that beeps variable, which is the number of times we're going to beep, and I can stick it in here. So we're going to repeat the number of times specified in the function parameter. And lastly, all we have to do is specify how many beeps we need when we call it. So now we've got 12 beeps. So we've gone from having no code at all to using some input logic, loops, timing, variables, and maths and functions blocks. This is a lot of CodeKit's functionality we've just explained here, and we've gone through a lot of the different types of blocks and common scenarios you'll have for using them. The last step is to put this code onto your Arduino board to test it out. And you can do this in two kind of main ways. Firstly is by clicking the copy button, and that code will then be copied to your clipboard. But I think the cooler function is the download button. If you click on this download button, you will have an INO file downloaded in a zip file. So if I open this file, you can see that inside of it is an INO file. And this is the same name as the folder, so that you can open it directly in the Arduino application without any errors. So that's pretty cool. And once you've opened that file, you can then upload it directly to your Arduino board. Now, this is just a basic overview of the CodeKit app. There's a lot more to it, and I'll go over just a few features that we haven't touched on yet before I finish up. Firstly is the block loader. Over here under all the categories, you can actually see this button that says more blocks. And if you click on it, you get the block loader here, which gives you options, little checkbox options for different categories. And we can enable or disable different categories to customize the toolbox. Text and messaging blocks are currently not shown by default. So I'll click apply and you'll see that those two categories have appeared. If you click on the messaging option, you've got all your different serial reading and writing options. And if you click on text, you've got all your different text printing and modification and different options there. Also, we have a preferences modal, and this is quite critical. So if you click on preferences, you have autosave code. We went over this before, but if you don't want your browser to autosave, this might be useful if you're in a school setting and you've got lots of different users coming on. You can deselect that. You can also turn on an advanced mode if you'd like, which will show some more categories in the sidebars, especially the input-output section right now. Also, you can select your board. If you remember before, we had drop-down menus for the different pins for both, there's PWM pins, there's regular digital pins, and there's also analog pins. Those pins will change dynamically depending on what board you have. And you type to search for the board. So if I have a Leonardo board, for example, I will type part of that name, I can then click on it, and we're all hokey pokey. Lastly, there's the theme options here, and you can select between light and dark, and we have an upcoming magma theme, which is going to be pretty cool. And this block loader moved message is just for people who've been using older versions of CodeKit. If you ever want to reset the app, so if you want to delete the code that's currently saved in the memory of the application, or just reset things back to how they were at the start, you can click that reset app and it will purge everything from the application on reload. So there you have it. We've built a simple first project within CodeKit. You've learned how to add blocks, modify them, and connect them together in an interesting and functional way to create some cool code. I hope this video has been interesting and informative for you, and I hope you have a really good time playing around with CodeKit and building some cool projects.